In this episode, we're delving into the disturbing case of Sara Lynn Krueger, a young mother with a tumultuous past filled with drug use and abusive relationships. Her life took a dark turn when something heinous was found in her apartment. This episode comes with a warning. Listen at your own discretion. Let's get into it right now on Love and Murder. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to a new episode of Love and Murder, the weekly true crime podcast discussing relationships gone terribly wrong. I'm your host, Kai, and this podcast discusses true crime cases told in the form of a story with mystery and suspense. Be sure to subscribe to Love and Murder on whatever platform you're on, as well as give us a 5-star review right after you listen to the episode, if you please. In today's episode, I want to tell you, seriously, listener discretion is advised. This is not a case for the faint of heart. It's a case of horrid child abuse. But first, I wanted to remind you to head on over to our exclusive group at www.patreon.com/love and murder. Our last bonus episode was the case of Phil Spector, a rich and famous man who threw it all away in one night. I still don't know why. Go ahead and check out that episode and maybe you could tell me why. Now, if you want episodes that go directly into the case and no intro, join us on Patreon for only $1 and above. www.patreon.com/love and murder. But enough about that. Now, on to the show. Sara Lynn Krueger was born in 1987, and this case takes place in Napa, California. I don't really know exactly where she was born. She was maybe born in Napa, but I know the case takes place in Napa. Sarah's father was named John Krueger, and she had a sister named Sophia Gretsch. Now, growing up, Sara was known for her drug use, basically during her teens. Despite this, she was an overall nice person and had a close relationship with her father. However, she still had a mean streak in her and was known for being abusive to her partners. Ryan Scott Warner was born in 1985 in Napa, California. He lived there his entire life, except for a short period of time when he moved away, but he ended up coming back. There's no information that I could find about his family, his education, or anything like that. However, he too had a troubled past and you started using drugs as a teenager. He was also involved in local gangs. As he grew up, he became increasingly abusive and manipulative with his partners. So kind of sounds like Sara a little bit. Sara and Ryan met and began a relationship in the summer of 2015 when Sara was only 15 and Ryan was 17. Being that they were already using drugs, they started using drugs together. They used meth and, quote, fell in love. But their relationship was short-lived and ended at the end of the summer because Ryan had moved. At 16, Sara then met a man named Jason Slusher. They met at what's called a, quote, drug house and started a relationship. When she was 17, she moved in with Jason and his parents and lived with them for a couple of years. Both Sara and Jason had bad tempers and were known to be physically violent with each other. Not a good start. Once, Sara hit Jason in the head with a piece of wood, and in response, Jason slammed the car door on her arm. Wow. Once, while arguing, Jason threw something at Sara, who then pulled a knife on him. This sounds like a healthy relationship. And before the naysayers leave me a message saying how judgmental I sound, sit down and listen to the rest of the episode, and then see if you're still judgmental about my judgmental tone. The couple eventually got their own apartment. Yeah, because that's the next step. And shortly after that, she got pregnant. Oh, wait, that's the next step. It's shocking to note that even during her pregnancy, Sara was still using drugs, but just, quote, just marijuana. On April 3rd, 2010, their daughter, Kayleigh, was born. Kayleigh was described by everyone as a happy little girl, bubbly, happy, just always smiling. Family, friends, and neighbors said that for the first 3 years of her life, she was a happy and healthy little girl. Sara was a great mom, very attentive to her, and took her to the doctor regularly, like you should. She also had a relationship with Jason's family, as well as her grandparents and his. So basically, everybody's getting along. In the summer of 2011, Sara and Ryan reconnected with each other through Facebook, and whenever her and Jason would break up, she would reach out to Ryan. Then, whenever her and Jason would get back together, she would stop texting Ryan. In 2012, Sara and Kayleigh moved into a new apartment that was just their own apartment, but the apartment was in the same complex that she'd already been living in. Their new apartment was a small, tiny 2-bedroom, 1-bath that, of course, after some time, Jason ended up moving in with them. A short while later, they broke up again, and by June 2013, Sara ended up calling the police on Jason because he'd been stalking her. Jason was then arrested and sent to prison for a parole violation. Anyway, in October 2013, Ryan moved in with Sara, her daughter, and another roommate. Sara would occasionally work at a daycare where Kayleigh was actually going. And for money, Ryan was a drug dealer, but he only sold drugs so that he could buy his own drugs. So literally, he wasn't working. Neighbors who had watched Kayleigh grow up said that once Sara and Ryan got back together and Ryan moved in, they saw Sara playing outside less and less, and when they did see her, she was alone. When before, she was always with her mother and she was always outside having fun and everything like that. Also, when they did see her, they would notice bruises on her, notice that she didn't smile as much as she used to, or at all, period. She wouldn't say hi anymore. She looked very pale, and one time, she even had a black eye. Around the same time, Sara started barely speaking to her father, which was weird because, like I said before, she was really close to her father. And by January 2014, she was using hard drugs again. Now, there was a ton of abuse between Jason and Sara, but with Sara and Ryan, they used drugs together, meth like they did before, and they were abusive towards each other. Sara's friends would say that she considered Ryan to be her boyfriend, but Ryan always said, he never said they were romantically linked. He would always say that they were just in a friendship. They also said that Ryan was known for being verbally abusive and had a very controlling behavior. One of their neighbors, Brianne Abernathy, said that at one point Sara had a hand injury, which she said, she just got moving furniture. Like, oh, no, it's nothing. I just slammed it between the couch and the love seat or something. She also remembered hearing at least once a week, being woken up to something being slammed against the wall coming from Sara's apartment. Can you imagine being that neighbor? Ugh. Sara would always say that Ryan didn't physically abuse her like Jason did. I just want to point out here, I'm going to take a second to point out. Anybody listening to this that's going through something similar, abuse is abuse is abuse. Just because one type of abuse is less than another type of abuse or another person's abuse, or it's a different form of abuse like verbal or emotional or mental as opposed to physical, doesn't mean that it's not abuse. And you should stay away and you should not put up with it. And if you need help, then please reach out to someone. And I'm pretty sure there's at least one person in your life right now who's trying to help you, and you're probably pushing them away. Please stop. Get help. Kayleigh's grandparents and neighbors started to become worried about her welfare. Her grandparents hadn't seen her since October 2013. And then when people would ask about her, Sara would always say that she was sick and, try and make excuses so that they couldn't come and see her. Robin, who was Kayleigh's grandmother, was fearful of her safety, so she contacted NPD, the Napa Police Department, for a welfare check. Well, actually, there were multiple welfare checks placed for Kayleigh, and each time the cops didn't do anything, even with evidence of abuse. They would say because there was, quote, food in the house, Kayleigh was safe, even though the people in the house were avid drug users and Kayleigh had bruises on her body and she appeared malnourished. They would say that everything's fine, everything's okay. At 3 years old, she was only 41 inches tall and 34 pounds, or 1 meters, 1.5 centimeters, and 15 kilos. Anyway, police were called to investigate 5 damn times in 2 weeks and didn't do anything. On the night of January 29th, 2014, there was another police welfare check in which Sara, quote, actively tried to conceal the inside of her home from police by closing the front door against her body and peeking her head out to talk to them. You know what I'm talking about. You can picture that in your head. But the cops were like, doesn't seem suspicious at all, and left. Then, Ryan's friend, Antonio Valdez, said that for about 2 days, starting on the afternoon of January 30th, 2014, he received texts and calls from Ryan over and over and over again saying he needed help with some type of emergency. So for 2 days, Antonio just ignored him, and then finally he was like, okay, what? So on February 1st, around 12:30 a.m., Antonio and his brother drove to their apartment and got there, knocked on the door, was let in, and Ryan comes up to Antonio and says, "Hey, remember that kid that my girlfriend has, the 3-year-old? Yeah, well, she had, quote, drunk poison or bleach or something and was dead." End quote. That's what she told him. That's what he told him. Of course, as any rational human being would say, Antonio was like, nope. He wanted nothing to do with it. He didn't want his name in it. He didn't want to be involved in any kind of way. He basically got pissed at Ryan for calling him and trying to get him tangled up in something like, I don't even want to say try and get him tangled up in something, but you call this dude to help you with a child that drank poison or bleach or something and she's dead. What did you want him to help you do? Antonio didn't even want to know that answer. So he basically said, you better call the cops, which is what they should have done in the first place. And Ryan responded with, oh, I was just about to discuss doing that. You heard me right. About to discuss doing that. Antonio was like, I'm out. I'm gone. And later on, he actually called back to check if Ryan had called the police or not. And Ryan said that he'd be doing that a little later and, don't worry about it. I'm going to call the police. After a few hours, Antonio realized that they didn't plan on calling the cops at all. And so he decided that he was going to do it himself. And to that, I say, damn Skippy. This is the first time in 2 years of doing cases that I heard someone who took the initiative. Anyways, in the afternoon on that same day, Napa police officer Robert Chambers went to the home and found Kayleigh's body laying in her bed. He basically was able to get a key, probably from the landlord or something, was able to enter the home. And upon searching the home, that's when he found Kayleigh's body lying in her bed with evidence of having suffered severe physical abuse, being very badly beaten. The body was severely bruised and there was blood coming from the nostrils. Ryan and Sara, though, were nowhere to be found. And neighbors said that they'd last seen Kayleigh with them And they'd last seen Ryan and Sara when they left the house around the morning of January 30th. But they couldn't confirm that Kayleigh was with them at that time. They just assumed, you know? So police went in search of the couple, and on February 2nd, someone spotted the couple at a restaurant. A woman named Sylvia Melendez, she spotted them at a restaurant. She'd actually been watching the news and saw a story about police looking for two suspects in connection with the death of a little girl. And the news story showed pictures of Sara and Ryan. So the woman saw that picture and she was like, they're sitting across from me. I mean, if that ever happened to you, has that ever happened to you? Have you ever seen a news story with the pictures and you saw the person or people right there next to you? I would love to hear about it. That's never actually happened to me. So she called the cops. The Bay Area Rapid Transit, or BART for short, station police officer Boutain, I hope I said that name right, got the alert about where they were, which was right next to him. He was actually stationed across the street from where the restaurant was. So he went over there, he saw them, and he went over to them and asked them if they needed help. And that's when Sara started to cry. And she said that they needed to talk to the Napa police about something that happened in Napa. So Sara and Ryan were then arrested, and Sara's phone was taken for investigation. They then took them back to Napa, and that's when they were interrogated. During the interrogation, police looked at Sara's phone and saw searches on her phone from January 23rd to about January 25th for things like, quote, if vitamin E was good for bruises and how to get rid of bruises. And another search for, quote, women jailed on suspicion of child abuse. After the date of Kayleigh's death, Sara's phone searches were for U.S. cities with the highest population. I guess they were trying to disappear? Just one guess. I don't know why you would look that up. Anyway, Sara and Ryan were separated, and Sara was interviewed first. And she was asked what happened to Kayleigh. Do you know what happened to your daughter? Let us know what's going on. So Sara sang like a bird. She said that on the night of January 29th, 2014, she went to check on her daughter and found her in the bathroom drinking something from a measuring cup. She said that she was aware that the cup had had 2 squirts of Windex and some dirty water in it that Ryan had used to clean his tobacco pipe. She said she could actually see the tobacco in the sink. And Kayleigh had told her mother that she had poured out the water, and she had poured out what was in the cup and then filled it up with water because she was thirsty. And at this time that this happened, that she poured out the water and everything, Sara, Ryan, and remember they had a roommate, their friend Alan, were in the apartment. But I think at this point, Alan had moved out and he was just there like visiting. That's allegedly, I don't know if Alan was the one who was the roommate, but either way, he was there at this time where she was drinking this thing from the bathroom. So over the course of the night, Kayleigh threw up a few times. And when she was throwing up, Sara said she started to yell and asked Ryan where the phone was so she can call poison control because she's figuring this is why her little girl is throwing up. Also that same night, a police welfare check came to the house. Remember when she wouldn't let the cops come in the house? So she was trying to call poison control, but thankfully police officers showed up at the house, which should have been like, oh, thank you, I'm so happy you're here. But instead you tried to block the doorway? Like, it's not making sense to me. Anyway, like I said before, the cops figured everything was okay and they left. And so because Sara didn't actually call poison control or tell the police what was going on, the detective asked her, why didn't she? And she said, well, Kayleigh was throwing up and Ryan had been using meth both that day and that night. Oh, and by the way, so was I. And we had a friend over named Alan, and he was too. But, officer, by the time Kayleigh had drunk that liquid, I was coming, quote, back down, coming back to, she said she was coming back to her senses. And then she wanted to call poison control, But Ryan told her not to because, Kayleigh was already throwing up. So that's what she needed to do to get everything out of her system. So why call poison control? And like any rational mother would do, Sara said, okay. When Kayleigh finally stopped throwing up, Sara went ahead and put her to bed. And then she went to bed herself, which is nowhere near in any kind of sentence you would hear me say if my daughter had drunk poison at 3 years old and she was throwing up. I'm up for the next probably 2 weeks watching her constantly. But then again, I would have called poison control, the police, the firefighters, my mom, my entire family, anybody who had any issues with poison before. I'd have probably done an episode asking y'all, hey, I need help. Somebody message in now. Here's my phone. Look, I would have been going crazy. But then again, that's just me. So when Sara woke up in the afternoon of January 30th, she went to check on her child and found Kayleigh on the bathroom floor with her zip-up PJs off, which was normal of Kayleigh. She liked taking her PJs off. And she would, just walk around. She would just walk around naked sometimes with her PJs zipped off. Some children do that. That's not weird. But the weird part is she's just on the bathroom floor. That's what I think is weird. So when Sara went to wake her up, Kayleigh was stiff and cold to the touch. Sara said that after she found Kayleigh, she held her and then put her to bed and wrapped her in blankets. For the rest of the afternoon and the rest of that day and the following day, she would go to her daughter's room and check on her. She said that she would have called the police, but Ryan said police wouldn't believe them and he wasn't, quote, going to jail for something I didn't do, end quote. Ryan then started calling people, and on Friday, some friends of his from a gang came over. Ryan told her that these friends were actually high-ranking gang members, and so they terrified her. So basically, what we said before was basically Antonio and his brother who came over. As much, and then the funny thing to note here is, as much as he was a high-ranking gang member and they terrified Sara, who was actually the real monster in this story? Anyway, we know what happened already once Antonio came. On Saturday morning, after the two men left, Sara said that she'd called the police and Ryan put Kayleigh's body in the freezer to, quote, preserve the evidence. Are you serious right now? Sara said that she may have passed out after that and that her daughter's body was in the freezer for about 3-ish hours before she took the body out and put it back in the bed, wrapped it up in blankets and a pillow and a toy. So your boyfriend put your daughter's body in a freezer and you went to sleep? Anyways, okay, so she wrapped it up in a pillow and a toy and everything like that. And then they fell asleep again for another couple hours. And then they woke up and decided to leave. So at about 10 a.m. on Saturday, that wasn't a couple hours that they slept. But anyway, about 10 a.m. on Saturday, they left the apartment, walked to a nearby GameStop, tried to sell their PS3, but GameStop wouldn't buy it. But later on, they were able to sell it to someone at a Home Depot, and they used that money to get a ride to Vallejo, where they then caught a bus to a BART station. Then they went to San Francisco and walked around, went to a church, they said, to, quote, pray and had a pastor help them call the police, end quote. But the church was closed. So I guess, you can't call the police. On Sunday morning, they took Bart back to the station and then went to a restaurant because Ryan was hungry. And, you can't let Ryan get hungry. Sara then turned on her phone at the restaurant. And to me, that sounds like a day of mourning your 3-year-old. Heavy, heavy sarcasm right there. So detectives were like, okay, yeah, I hear your whole story. You wanted to do the right thing. You wanted to call police. You wanted to call poison control, but mean old Ryan wouldn't let you. So, okay, yeah. How about that bruising on Kayleigh's body? Oh, Sarah's like, oh, okay, yeah. Well, Kayleigh had fallen off of her bike and it was actually just a small bruise. She also said that her daughter did have a black eye, but what had happened was Ryan and Kayleigh bumped heads because Kayleigh was trying to jump up to Ryan for a hug, and she ended up bumping his head with her eye, I guess, and that's how she got the black eye. She said when that happened, she wasn't around. She had actually gone to the grocery store, but she didn't have a reason to not believe it. I mean, that happens, right? Children jump up to hug you and only their eye hits you somewhere hard. That happens a lot. I mean, I'm pretty sure it's happened to somebody, but she also told officers that Kayleigh actually had the flu 2 weeks before she died. Her temperature was at 102 and then it went down to 100 and she seemed to be getting better. And she also told officers that her and Ryan were together for just a couple of months and their relationship was, quote, complicated, but he was always good to Kayleigh. So a little while later, another detective came in, Detective Hess, and asked who was the one who gave Kayleigh baths, and also re-asked if Sarah had noticed any bruising on her when she bathed her. So Sarah said that both her and Ryan were the ones who gave her baths, and she never noticed any bruising. The only thing she ever noticed was like bruising on her knees and her elbows, but I just figured that was from playing. She said that Ryan would also sometimes be alone with Kayleigh, like when Sarah went to the store and stuff. The detectives then asked how they put Kayleigh in the freezer, and Sarah said that Ryan had folded up her legs, put her in a plastic garbage bag, and then in a suitcase, and then put the suitcase in the freezer. And by the way, the freezer had no food in it. And to that I say, what the And I'm not even saying that like if food was even in the freezer, just you put your child in the freezer. She also told Detective Hess about, Antonio. She said these two men came to her apartment Saturday morning, going over the whole story again. And she did promise them that she was going to call the police, but she didn't. And she was afraid to call the police because Ryan told her that if he went to jail, then these men would come after her, which, she believed because they were horrible people who were in a gang, even though you can't even say pot meets kettle because it's just so much worse. She also said that Ryan had her phone most of the time, and when she did get her phone back, she turned it on, and that's when she saw she had a lot of text messages, and that's when she knew that the police were coming for them. So detectives asked her to tell them about Ryan. And she said, well, Ryan was, he was pretty good. He did get angry. He would yell a lot, but mostly it wasn't crazy. He only got physical with her one time when he slammed her hand in a door, but she didn't know if it was on purpose or not. You remember? Same story, different person. She also said that when Ryan was on meth, he would be up for days and his temper was really short. Of course, because he's on meth. As far as Sarah knew, Ryan was really good to her daughter. He spanked her with an open hand a couple of times, and she told him, don't do that again. And Ryan said, of course, okay, I promise I won't. Scouts, honor. Sarah then again started mentioning the last couple of weeks of Kayleigh's life, where she said that Kayleigh and Ryan got along great in this time. Now, she only mentioned this because Ryan would usually get angry at Kayleigh for, quote, holding in her poop. So, okay, now she's confusing me because number one, I thought she was never aware of Ryan having any problems with Kayleigh, but now he usually did. And number two, he got angry at a 3-year-old for holding in her poop. Why didn't you just take her to a doctor to find out why? And at first, Sara thought that it was strange that he would take Kayleigh to the bathroom. But, she was okay with it because Kayleigh would tell Ryan that she loved him and that she wished Ryan was her dad. Really? At 3 years old, she was cognizant enough to understand that concept. Okay. Now, on Ryan's side of the interrogation, he told detectives that he'd put Kayleigh's body in the freezer. He wrapped her in a plastic bag and kept it frozen for about 6 hours before Sara started panicking and saying that they need to, quote, get out of there. She then took the body out of the freezer and put it into bed with a blanket and some toys around it, and then read a bedtime story to it, and then they left the apartment. That was his story. In November 2015, Napa County District Attorney filed charges for Ryan and Sara with 2 counts of murder with the special circumstances of torture. Their cases were then tried to separate juries in the spring of 2017. During the trial, forensic pathologist Dr. Joseph Cohen testified. He'd actually been the pathologist who'd examined the body of the baby. He testified that the injuries on her body were far beyond what a normal 3-year-old would have in the course of her life. None of these bruises were from playing-related injuries. The cause of her death was by repeated episodes of major blunt force trauma to the abdomen. You'll see why. Brace yourself also. And from here on out, listener discretion is advised. Other injuries that were found were consistent with beating, not spanking, or falling off a bike. He also testified that all of these injuries would have left her in constant pain, like the fact that he found a broken rib that had healed, which would have caused her pain to move and breathe. 3 years old, remember that. As far as the trauma that led to her death, as I stated, it was blunt force trauma to the abdomen, as well as external trauma to her entire body. Even her spine had injuries, but all of the injuries came from frontal force. Do you understand how hard she had to have been hit for it to injure her spine from the front? I just told my mom today that I couldn't be law enforcement because at night I would become a vigilante. I couldn't see something like this and then just say, hopefully the courts will put them in prison where they would be fed, clothed, and have a place to sleep for years while taxpayers paid for their comfort. I couldn't do it. I don't know. It's just not in me. I would have to retire in my first year. I couldn't do it. I the police who have to deal with this, I don't even know how y'all do it. I'm so sorry that y'all have to do this, but I don't even know how y'all do it. I hope y'all are getting constant counseling to keep your mind, I guess, at ease as much as you can say at ease. I don't know, but I'm so sorry y'all have to deal with this. Anyway, the injuries to her body caused her intestines to rupture. Basically, he found this as he was examining the body and found that the entire abdominal area was green, which is a sign of infection. Now, in my entire life, I've never heard of such a thing. This poor baby was probably in so much pain. Ah. Y'all, I'm like trying not to cry right now, for real, for real. Anyway, when the doctor cut open the abdomen, 2 cups of liquid gushed out. This liquid was a mixture of blood and the contents of the ruptured intestine. And it was noted that in the middle of the intestine, there was necrotic tissue. Necrotic tissue means that in the middle of her intestines, the intestines itself were dying. As I said, all of these injuries would have been very painful for her and would have caused her to throw up. She would have also had bleeding from her anus, and the amount of pain that she was in would have made her pass out. Do you understand how much pain you have to be in to pass out? Women give birth and stay awake. This baby was in so much pain, people, that she passed out. Like, I feel like I'm about to throw up myself. Although they could tell the reason for the death, they couldn't tell the court exactly when she died. Now, there's so much more to the trial, and I'm going to post it as a bonus for this week in our Patreon. I had another bonus in mind, but we're going to have to forego that, and we're going to have to put the trial as a bonus in our Patreon. So if you want to hear more, if you want to hear the trial and everything, come on and join us over there, www.patreon.com/love and murder. If I went through the whole trial here, this would be a 3-part episode. So we're just going to put the trial in our Patreon for this week. Anyway, and of course, a guilty verdict came back for both Sara and Ryan. Guilty of first-degree murder and torture, including assault resulting in the death of a child under 8 years old. As you would guess, both Sara and Ryan said that they were innocent. And they also never once even showed sorrow for what happened to that poor child. Both of them received the strong middle finger and life sentences without the possibility of parole. They were taken to prison in Napa County. The couple, of course, made multiple attempts to appeal every part of their case. One of their appeals was requested in the torture of Kayleigh. Their appeal said that there wasn't enough evidence to prove that they intentionally killed her. One piece of evidence that Sara's defense brought was the fact that she brought Kayleigh a popsicle when she was sick, which was interpreted by the appeals court as an intent for Sara to hydrate Kayleigh and not kill her. Dude, you're not hallucinating what I'm saying. You heard me. On Wednesday, January 20th, 2021, the court threw out the torture charge. Can you freaking believe that? And a resentencing has been requested, but currently no court date has been put forth yet. And that, folks, is the fucked up case of how a little girl was brutally murdered and her mother and boyfriend are trying to get over on it and say they're innocent. And in at least one aspect of it, the court agreed. Who's as pissed off as I am right now? Let me know in the comments below, because fuck these people. In May 2015, Kayleigh's father and his parents filed a federal lawsuit against the city of Napa and the county. The wrongful death lawsuit was based on the allegation that the NPD and the Child Welfare Services didn't properly and sufficiently investigate complaints that Kayleigh was being abused. On Wednesday, January 2nd, 2019, the federal court called for the city and county of Napa, California to pay $2.5 million to Jason and $2.5 million to his parents, Robin and Benny Slusher. In a statement, the city wrote, quote, Kayleigh Slusher's death was a terrible tragedy. The city and county of Napa have committed to doing everything in their power to prevent and protect other children from suffering child abuse and neglect. The murder of a child by her caregiver is unfathomable and an unspeakable tragedy for her grandmother and father. Kayleigh's death shocked and saddened the entire Napa community. End quote. Deputy County Executive Officer Molly Radigan told the Los Angeles Times, quote, when the county and Child Welfare Services maintains that CWS followed state law when responding to the complaint of abuse and neglect, we came to the decision that it was best to end the litigation and settle the case. The city The police department and the officers all deeply regret that they were not able to discover the truth about Kayleigh's physical and life-threatening injuries and were not able to save her life. End quote. The city also said that there would be improvements to the city's policies for reporting suspected child abuse. In addition, there will be updates to officers and dispatchers' training. Julia Sherwin, one of the Slusher's attorneys, told People magazine, quote, "It took a village to kill Kayleigh. Two of the people responsible for her death were held accountable in the criminal courts. We filed this case to bring reform and accountability to the rest of the people who caused Kayleigh's death." End quote. Robin then added, quote, "If the police and social workers had done their job, Kayleigh would still be here." End quote. And Jason said, quote, "I don't have words to describe the pain and agony I have experienced since Kayleigh's death. It never goes away. But I want to make sure no child ever suffers the way Kayleigh did." End quote. And that's the end of the case. And I'm emotionally spent. I will be recounting the trial as a bonus later this week in our Patreon, like I said. If you want to hear it, then head on over to www.patreon.com/loveandmurder and become a member of $5 and above. Let me know what y'all thought about this tragedy in the comments below. Please leave us a 5-star review on whatever platform you're currently listening to on. Sorry, I sound like this. I have nothing left in me. Follow us on social media, which all the links are below. I don't have it in me to go through all of them today. As a reminder from Rick, lock your doors at night. And from Love and Murder to our lambs, kiss and hug your kids, show them love. And remember, y'all, it's all love and no murder. Bye.